London, September 3rd, 1878. A warm evening, a crowded deck, and water that looked harmless. When the quiet broke, the Thames didn't just swallow people, it smothered them in the city's own waste. Within minutes, a pleasure steamer snapped, folded, and went under. Hundreds were dragged into a river freshly dosed with raw sewage and industrial filth. More than 650 never came home. A city that learned to live with its dirt discovered what happens when that dirt fights back. This is the story of the Princess Alice, a summertime outing, a small navigational misread, and a river whose hidden contents turned disaster into catastrophe. You begin with a day that feels like any other London late summer, all bustle and promise. The Thames is the city's moving street. Tugs, barges, coasters, paddle steamers. Along the banks, chimneys throw a brown gauze over the skyline. The railway bridges drum with traffic. And all morning at a pier near London Bridge, a cheerful crowd steps aboard a side-wheel paddle steamer painted for pleasure cruises. Open decks and a saloon, a thin, elegant hull, side paddles housed in rounded sponsons. She was built back in the 1860s for the Clyde and renamed for London service Princess Alice. Excursion steamers like her were the middle class's new indulgence: cheap tickets, sea air without the sea, music on deck. You bought a paper bag of buns, you packed a small tin lunch, and you took your children where the air smelled less like smoke. That morning, the Princess Alice leaves with a festive load bound downriver for Gravesend and the famous Rocherville Gardens at Northfleet, a Victorian theme park long before the phrase existed. Rocherville promises grottos, ferny walks, bandstands, swings and fireworks. You can hear it in the passengers' voices, clerks out from city offices, shop girls with ribbons, mothers keeping hold of small hands, a few soldiers on leave, elderly couples who like the river's easy motion. There are not many life belts aboard, nobody thinks they'll need them, and no safety talk. Why would there be? The Thames is familiar, domesticated. It's not the Atlantic, it's the city's backyard. The river draws them out past the tower, past the new docks, past the industrial east. Warehouses give way to wharves, wharves to marshes. To the south are the big pumping works of Crossness. To the north, Beckton's gasworks and the new sewage outfall. The ship's paddles clop and churn a white lace behind her. People lean on the rail and point at landmarks. Children fall asleep on laps. The day at the gardens is the sort that sends people to bed smelling of grass and fried potatoes. There's music, there are puppet shows. There's time to stroll down to look across the Thames at Tilbury Fort. At dusk, the crowd trickles back to the pier, sun-pink and satisfied. The steamer takes them again, Princess Alice, bright lit now, her decks crowded, and turns upstream for home. London calls them back like a magnet. Upstream, against the ebb, which is to say the tide is still running toward the sea, the river busy with vessels taking advantage of the flow. It is around 7:30 in the evening when the river narrows to Galleon's Reach, a gently curving stretch of water between Tripcock Point on the south and the North Bank marshes. Twilight is settling. A breeze makes small textures on the water. Lamps glimmer along decklines. A collier, Bywell Castle, is moving downriver, bound seaward to take on coal for the Tyne, her iron hull black and purposeful. Collier is the word for a workhorse, a ship that hauls coal, often heavy, often deep laden. Her bows are built firm. She is not designed to give way. Two ships, two sets of eyes on two bridges peering into a grey-blue dusk at a very busy river. In the 1870s there are rules of the road: keep to the starboard right side when meeting, in the same spirit as car traffic later. But there's also the river's own logic of tide and bend, and there's human interpretation. The Princess Alice is angling across the channel to keep her line for the centre of the fairway. The Bywell Castle holds her course, then, sensing uncertainty, sheers to correct. Signals are made, perhaps a whistle, perhaps a slow swing of a rudder, but the agreed choreography of who turns where breaks down in the seconds where it matters most. Witnesses later disagree on the exact angles. That's common in collisions. Memory flashes, then tries to repair itself around a shock. But this much is clear. In the gathering dark, the two hulls find each other exactly where they shouldn't. The Bywell Castle's stem, the thick iron prow, drives into the Princess Alice on her starboard side, just abaft the paddle box. Iron meets timber and thin plating. The collier's bow opens the excursion steamer as if it were a tin of biscuits. What follows happens too quickly for neat sentences. The Princess Alice seems to fold along the line of the blow. Plates wrench. A ragged V opens to the river. The deck collapses in a groan. People are knocked flat, then flung. The paddles, still turning, thrash once and stop, the machinery choked by the impossible noise of breaking ship. The smell of spilled coal smoke, warm wood, river and steam erupts all at once. The collier's crew shout orders to back engines, to throw lines. The Bywell Castle herself shudders, then slides free, and the wound becomes a mouth. Water rushes in. The Princess Alice breaks, some say in 3, then rolls and goes down within minutes. Imagine that deck in the half-light. Women who can't swim because few women are taught. Children in slippery shoes. Men who throw off jackets and boots too late. People clutching at the rail and finding it suddenly vertical because the deck has turned sky. The river's coldness is a shock. The current is stronger than anyone expects. The cries are immediate and human, and then, chillingly, they are fewer. And now the part that makes this more than just a collision. The Thames at Galleon's Reach has, that very afternoon, been dosed by London's solution to its own filth. For years, the city's sewage system, engineered in the wake of the Great Stink of 1858, has carried waste east to outfalls at Beckton, North Bank, and Crossness, South Bank, disgorging it into the river on the ebb, the idea being that the tide would carry it away. But away is a forgiving word. The outfalls release a sludge of raw sewage and industrial effluent, human waste, animal byproducts, dyes, acids, liquid from gasworks, all the city's unlovely fluids. On this particular evening, the outfalls have recently discharged. The surface looks normal in the dim, the water itself is a chemical soup. Survivors who strike out for the shore get a mouthful and begin coughing violently. Eyes burn, throats seize. Even strong swimmers find their strength going not to stroke, but to retching. Those who inhale as they plunge under, most people do, once involuntarily, take in not river but poison. Rescue is improvisation. The Bywell Castle lowers boats and hauls aboard as many as they can reach. Other craft, barges, small steamers, converge on the flailing patch of river, catching those who can clutch a fender or a coil of rope. The tide moves the living and the dead together in a slow, unstoppably downstream drift. Lamps thrown over the side illumine faces for a second, just long enough to see a hand lose its grip. On the south bank near Tripcock Point, marsh grass receives bodies like flotsam. On the north, in the creeks toward Beckton, searchers wade in boots and are overcome by the stench and the film on the water, which clings. Alongshore people light bonfires to help rescuers see. A few men strip to their shirts and tie handkerchiefs over their mouths and noses before going in again. The current takes others downriver for miles. Some survivors stagger out far from where they went under. News runs ahead of the recovery. A messenger on a horse. Men pounding on police station doors, telegraph keys in offices with bad coffee. London's papers hear collision, a steamer, an excursion. Many lost and hurry to the river with notepads and a few too many adjectives. By midnight, the Princess Alice is already a place on the chart rather than a ship. She rests in the channel, broken. For families, the search is immediate and terrible. A husband returns home to Suffolk alone and begins walking the riverbank with a lantern. A mother waits at London Bridge Pier until the first light when a tug arrives with the saved and the stunned, and her daughter is not among them. A policeman stands by an array of small shoes lined along a station wall, each taken from a body and placed in a row so that someone might recognise a scuffed toe or a stitched flower. The morning uncovers the scale of it. The river begins to give back. bodies come ashore in clusters at the bends. Work crews make grim circuits with long hooks. Bargemen are given a grim, unasked-for task: tow this skiff, full of the drowned, to the yard where they can be laid side by side for identification. By afternoon, warehouses near Woolwich and Plaistow have been converted into temporary mortuaries. Families arrive in a low, constant tide. Clerks with lists try to maintain some order. The lists cross with the rumours. Numbers appear on chalkboards, are revised again as more are found. Among the lost are whole families. Among the saved are those who will never understand why they were the one the rope reached. Those who went down to rescue spend that first night coughing, spitting, swearing they can still taste the river. Doctors note something awful. People who appeared to be doing well, who managed a long swim and reached a boat, begin to sicken, lungs inflamed by what they swallowed. It is not just drowning anymore, it is poisoning by a city's waste. Inquests begin in rooms not meant for them, a civic hall, a riverside office. Coroners sit in shirt sleeves in the heat and listen to the same story. Our boat was going upstream, the collier was coming down, the night was not yet fully dark, and try to map from differing accounts a single clean trajectory of blame. A formal inquiry convenes under the Board of Trade. The language is careful and Victorian, but the questions are hard. Did the Princess Alice keep to her proper side of the channel? Did the Bywell Castle keep too much to midstream? Were signals misunderstood or not given? What were the speeds? How many lifebelts were carried? Why so few boats? Survivors describe the moment of impact in short, hammering phrases. One man remembers a woman in a plaid shawl. Another recalls how his shoes felt like anchors. The master of the Bywell Castle, his eyes rimmed red, explains his manoeuvres on a rough sketch of the river's curve. The Princess Alice's captain cannot testify. He went down with his vessel. The board examines charts, consults the rule of the road, and zeroes in on that small, fatal choreography. Two ships approaching. Who, at the last, turned across whose bow? In the end, the inquiry assigns most of the responsibility to the Princess Alice's navigation. She should, they say, have kept further to starboard and not crossed the collier's line. The Bywell Castle is faulted for not doing more earlier to avoid the developing situation, but she is not held primarily to blame. It is a decision that pleases no one exactly, because blame, while necessary on paper, does not revive a single life. And yet the river world understands. In collisions, the lighter, more agile craft are expected to keep out of the way of the laden ones. But outside the diagrams and testimony, something else is building. Fury over the water itself. Newspapers that last month ran light pieces about holiday excursions now run leaders with headlines that bite. The river as cloaca, a sewer. They print accounts of rescuers who were driven back by the stench, of survivors who said that the water burned their mouths, of doctors who insist that a clean river would have cost fewer lives. The word outfall, previously technical, becomes public property, the place where the city empties itself. If the collision made the night deadly, the sewage made it obscene. Engineers and officials from the Metropolitan Board of Works, a formidable phrase, are called to answer. They point to the great stink years ago when London was unlivable, and to the sewers that did undeniably save the city from cholera. They insist the tidal flow is meant to carry effluent out to sea on the ebb. But the Princess Alice sank on an ebb, and the outfalls had only recently discharged a load, thick with the worst of urban liquids, and the sinking happened between those two mouths. The river did what rivers do. It carried and mixed and offered back only what it was given. It was given poison. For once, public fury aligns with practical politics. In the weeks after the disaster, the Board of Works accelerates measures to treat sewage rather than simply pour it raw into the river. Chemical precipitation settling tanks and eventually sludge boats to carry the thickened sludge out to dumping grounds offshore. None of it is perfect, but it is better. It is what grief can purchase where sentiment cannot. A regulation, a redesigned valve, a schedule that lets the river breathe. The nautical world changes too. On the Thames, navigation rules are clarified and enforced with a new severity. Pilots and masters will be less free to rely on custom and more bound to agreed signals and lanes. Excursion steamers, so often seen as floating parlours, are made to carry more life-saving equipment. After the Princess Alice, it will be harder for a pleasure craft to leave London Bridge piled high with families and just a handful of lifebelts hanging from a beam. And the city remembers. It cannot forget. The river will not let it. Large burial grounds in East London and Woolwich take in the dead, and in those cemeteries stand memorials tall and sober with the date cut deep. Names upon names, some stones list entire households. Other graves say only unknown female or unknown child. On anniversaries, relatives come with flowers. And on ordinary days, school children on history walks read the plaques with the hushed astonishment of people who can hardly believe that something so huge could have happened where buses now queue and planes cross the sky to the airport. There are ripples you don't see at first. Insurance firms quietly adjust how they assess excursion steamers. River police drill more often and learn to coordinate with dockmen for nighttime searches. At Crossness and Beckton, engineers send new drawings upstairs and get them signed faster than they would have in August. Medical men gather case notes on secondary drowning and chemical pneumonitis, terms rarely seen in lay papers but painfully familiar to anyone who watched a person die days after being hauled alive from the river. Those case notes will save someone, somewhere, later. It's easy to make a disaster into a parable, a sinful city punished, industrial modernity revealed as hubris. But the Princess Alice doesn't need moral myth. Its facts are plenty. A family wants a day out. A ship captain interprets a rule. A river does its blind arithmetic with current and tide. A city uses its water as both artery and drain. The mathematics align, and 650 people don't come home. When storytellers call this the worst disaster on the Thames, they aren't being rhetorical. London had fires and plagues, and the river has claimed bodies every year. But never in a single evening did it take such a crowd, and never did it remind Londoners so plainly that the convenience they enjoyed, the ability to flush and forget, had a shadow. The Princess Alice made the shadow visible. To rescue boats in the first hours, it looked like a greasy sheen and a sickly sweetness. The smell of a city's inside spread flat across the water. Picture the two ships one last time. The Bywell Castle is big, iron, efficient. She is a tool of an industrial age that runs on coal and schedules. The Princess Alice is all weekend brightness and song. She carries the city's softer part. And yet it is the river that has the last word. It doesn't care for categories, work or pleasure, innocence or error. It reflects the lamps, hides the bends, and carries whatever you drop into it, hope, waste, or a shipful of people, downstream. People living along the Thames today pass the spot without knowing. The river is cleaner now, seals are seen upriver, and sometimes even porpoises. The outfalls that once belched untreated filth are managed. Tankers carry sludge out to sea, treatment works strip out the worst. Rules for passing are clearer, captains taught more rigorously, and pleasure boats wear their lifebelts where you can see them. A tragedy once made invisible by the next day's work has left its ring on the city's memory and, literally, on its infrastructure. If you stand at Galleon's Reach on a calm evening and look downriver as the tide turns, you might see how it could have happened. The bend is gentle but deceptive. The channel isn't a straight hallway. It's a conversation between banks that don't speak plainly. The light fades in a way that flattens judgment. A ship coming up and a ship going down, each with a place to be, can slide into a shared mistake in seconds. The hardest part of telling this story is that nothing in it is extraordinary by itself. Excursion steamers were common, colliers were everywhere. The sewage outfalls had been doing their work quietly for years. It was normal to trust that a simple river rule would be interpreted the same way by two men looking into the same dusk. The Princess Alice is the moment where normal proved insufficient. A century and a half on, the river looks wide and welcoming at high tide. It always did, but it remembers, and so should we.